Anyway, so welcome everyone to our webinar, our showcase webinar on community gardens today. Thank you so much for joining. Just a bit of housekeeping. So as I mentioned, we will be doing recording and we will share a link for the event after the meeting. If you're able, please maybe mute yourself during the presenters bits so that you don't have background noise. And any of the links or anything that come up in the chat, I will share those as well in an email after the event. So just to let people know the format today, we have speakers from Broomfield Park and the Up Garden. So they'll speak for about 10 minutes each approximately, and then we'll have Q&A afterwards. Before I hand over to our presenters, Dave Morris from the LFGN was just going to give a few words about the LFGN, which is one of the key organisers of the event today. So Dave, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah. So just say the London Friends of Green Spaces network is the umbrella organisation for all the Friends groups across London. There's about 1,000 Friends groups, and we have a regular series of meetings to coordinate things and to develop strategic ideas and partnerships and share best practice and so on. And we cooperate with Go Parks London for example, on this showcase meeting, and it's quite a short meeting. So straight into the meeting, Laura, then.
Okay, great. I'm just Billy is having trouble logging in. Okay, so let me just introduce our speakers then. So before I started, just wanted to give a bit of a background to why we are holding this event today. So community gardens can take on different forms, but typically are a really key focal point for local people to interact with nature and interact with each other. They provide opportunities for learning green skills and sometimes food growing, for example. And we thought it would be interesting in today's webinar to hear from two different types of groups with different setups. So first we'll hear from Kim and David of Broomfield Park, where the garden orchard are set within the larger context of the green space of Broomfield Park. And then we'll hear from Suzanne from the Up Garden, where the community garden is in itself the entire site. So yes, I will hand over to Kim. Would you like to tell us about your project in Broomfield Park?
David's going to start.
Okay, I'm
going to start. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been involved in helping to set up the community orchard in Broomfield Park. It's now 15 years old, but gardening is a really important element of what volunteers are doing in the park. All over the park, we've got a remembrance garden, we've got long borders, we've got our growing space, and getting some echoing here.
Yeah. I'm just gonna mute a few people. I think that might help.
Is that better? Can you hear us now?
That's better.
Yeah. Tim had some sort of device on his windowsill that was distorting my voice. The Friends of Broomfield Park, a year ago, we did a survey for local people about what they liked about the park. And this is the Wordle document that summarised what people liked. And this has been quite an important thing for us to do, because we're able to focus on people's suggestions and develop projects and to do some tweaking here and there. Why isn't that going? The orchard in Broomfield Park, it's on an old bowling green, right off Alderman's Hill. Broomfield Park is fairly near the North Circular Road, and it's a very important local park for people. It's been very, very popular over the years. Here we are. This I discovered the bowling green. It had been unused for about 15 to 16 years by the Bowls Club. There were two bowling greens at that time, and I just thought this will make a lovely orchard. That's what it was like. Lots of wild sweet pea and various other things. And this was the sort of concept of the design, to have standard apple trees and fruit trees on a sort of cruciform pattern, and then espaliers around the outside, and then also step over trees. But we've got over 43 different types of apples now. And this was when we planted it for a BBC Tree O'Clock Day. And we had no trouble getting local people interested. It was a very good residents association. And it was quite hard work, actually, making sure the right trees got in the right place. And then as the orchard developed, we got a bench, and you can see in the bottom right-hand corner what it was like in 2011. So and now it's actually a really beautiful space. Lots of wildflowers, the trees have grown and are now established. And a lot of people come in there and say, look, this is a secret garden. This is an amazing space. And some people say they didn't even know it was there. We have an entrance, we have a notice, an arrow finger post sign pointing to it, but it can be quite a big surprise. One of the elements that's been in the orchard is the apiary. This is when Kim was managing the bees, and it's a very popular thing. We had a bee fun day. This young girl here on the left, that's a photograph from many years ago. She's grown up now, and Kim is doing a demonstration to local school. I think Hazelwood School, was it? Yeah. And they love putting on the bee suits. And the experience that the children have in things like when they come and visit the park is they always bring their parents along afterwards if they've been. You get very excited about this. We had to go at making a bug hotel. Unfortunately, this one got burnt down 3 years after it was built. Someone set fire to it. But that got these young kids really interested in insects. And one of the big things that draws people to the orchard is the range of events we have. And they're underpinned by some fantastic musicians who organise all our music. They're called That Blue Patch. And just to give you an idea, we have an art and crafts sale nearby to raise money for the orchard and apiary. We have open days, edible garden days, and one of the key events is our summer picnic in July. And this shows how parents come along with very young kids and they really enjoy things like tug of war. The fact that the events are so popular, our Apple Day, we have apple tasting, it's free, juicing the apples, children love doing that. And we have a vote about which apples are best, which they like best. And in fact, last year we did sell apples at a very low price to local people, just a token. One of the themes for the orchard that's run through the last 15 years is we've had Duke of Edinburgh Award volunteers. Top left corner are some from a few years ago. They made that scarecrow. And at the moment we have 4 working with us. And we also have a number of adults who come along on a Sunday afternoon between 2 and 4. A lot of people drop by and ask about how to grow apples and how to prune them and what apples that we would recommend. But I think we've been able to draw young people into the orchard through things like school visits. We tell them some of the interesting names of apples, for example. Oops, just go back to that. And also we have a wildflower hunt where they go hunting for wildflowers. The work taken to manage the orchard, the two of us go every Sunday between 2 and 4. and we get other people popping by. But this year we did a lot of pruning, and that was really hard work. And we're hoping that the council is going to shred or chip the prunings for us, which then can be used in the park. I think that's all I wanted to say at this minute.
Great, thank you. And then Kim was going to speak about a different growing space, a different community growing space, also within Broomfield Park. So over to you, Kim.
Okay. Yeah, so slide now, that next to the orchard, between the orchard and the tennis courts, there's a bit of unused grassland, really, and David spotted this as well and asked the council for a license to occupy it, and came up with a scheme for a community growing space and a wildlife pond, which the council were quite keen on doing at the time. And they gave the permissions, and they gave us a grant towards the wildlife pond, and then left us to it. And it was quite a big project. We got local community to come in and with ideas and to help measuring out. And we got the big diggers in, and it all looked as though it was getting much bigger than I thought it was going to be. But it all happened, and on the left you can see from an aerial view of the wildlife pond filled. We had to do quite a lot of structural work around it. Unlike the orchard, it's an open space that the public can come into, and it links. Well, it didn't link. There was a fence blocking us off from our clubhouse and orchard, and a huge thing was getting a gateway put in so we could access it. And eventually, as part of a different process, we got the council to give us a gate. But the steps, we made those ourselves, and particularly we made them with a group called Reach, who are it was a very good project for excluded school kids in Enfield. And we worked with them for about 6 or 7 years, a day a week in the park throughout the year. And they were brilliant. They actually built these steps, and then getting all the equipment. We got various equipment donated and funding. And we have had, over the years, we had huge problems with vandalism and robberies. So vital part was getting these secure storage sheds. We're also very lucky. We have a community cafe, which is an extension of the Friends, and all their profits they put back into the park, and they've given us funding for the growing space, which has been very helpful. So we had to clear the site. The picture I showed at the beginning was grass, but by the time we got onto it, it was full of brambles. So a lot of work doing that, and then putting in raised planters and deciding how we're going to plant it. We tried various different things. And so some of them got wildflowers and herbs. Some of them got fruit and vegetable crops. And we tried some of them berries, they're successful. We tried using polytunnels. And none of it's very easy really, because it's a public space. We get things planted up and growing, and we'll come in the next day and find they've all been trampled on, or dogs have been on them, or the groups who are doing them forget to come and water them. But we try as much as possible, we try and get young people and groups coming in. So we have different ones. The ones on the left are Reach, again, the excluded school kids. In the middle is a local school. We do school visits, year visits. On the right are one of the corporate groups who are working on the tree nursery. We're growing oaks to replace the ones that are dying in the park. Other groups, the community mental health group that David runs every week. It's great having them. And we've made some raised planters for people who can't bend. And who else do we have, David?
Let's try.
Yeah, well,
That was Reach, the top right one.
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah.
oh yes, the other important ones. Wesley is a is a school in Enfield for special educational needs and complex disability. And for several years, we had a class coming to us once a week, and that's been very nice. We ran a local project for growing from seed and invited children to come down, and we've been given some funding by Morrison's, our local supermarket. And so they took away seeds and compost to grow seedlings and brought them back to plant them. That was quite nice. Occasionally we get produce. This year we had the most fabulous produce, all these lovely beetroots, but lots of things. And in the middle there you can see a group. These are the Wesley kids, some of them with quite complex disability, working with a local chef to prepare a lunch which we all enjoyed eating. That was very nice. We don't get to that stage very often. This is another project. As I said before, our community cafe of the Greenery provide us with funding, and this was a particular project. They wanted to do something with the young people in the park, and this was a year group from our local school, and we had a company called Build Up Hackney come in to facilitate. And they brought the kids. The kids came into the park and explored, and came up with ideas of what they thought would be wanted by young people in the park. And then they spent several days doing their own designs, and then they built all of this with the build-up group. And this is called the Chill Space, and this is now open for young people to come in, which they do regularly, which is good. But also when they come and chill, they trample everything and leave lots of rubbish everywhere. But it's as I said, it's an open space, so we're not trying to close it off. This is the pond that we planted it with native plants, marginal and some reeds, and that's come on really well. We let the wildlife come on its own. It's extraordinary how quickly dragonflies, newts, and frogs and things all appear. And the wildlife is quite an important aspect for us. We did a lot of we made lots of bat boxes and bird boxes with our various children's groups. I said the newts appear very quickly, and the dragonflies. The butterfly you can see there is called a white letter hair streak, and that's a particular project. They've become quite rare, and they only lay their eggs on elm trees. So we've been planting some of a new variety of elm that's resistant to Dutch elm disease to try and bring them back. And to our great excitement, last year we discovered a white letter hair streak on a wych elm, which is in David's orchard, which had been planted by mistake. It was supposed to be a quince tree. There's some rare species there. The dragon we weren't quite expecting, were we, David?
No.
Another big thing for us in the growing space is composting. We have a habitats group, and a big focus is on developing wildflower meadows and wildflower patches, looking after the wetland. And as much as possible, we like to compost our green waste. But we also take all the waste from the compostable waste from the community cafe and mix them together. We have quite a complex 6-stage composting system, which is a lot of work, but works very well. But that's good. A lot of people are involved in that. And we have to do a lot of management, cutting reeds back, getting out brambles, just generally looking after everything. And we've been having a focus on developing traditional techniques and traditional tools. And Matt, who's in the middle picture, has become a specialist on scything, and he actually makes scythes and sharpens them. And this year we've learned how to hedge lay, This is around the wildlife pond, so we're going to be continuing that around the park. And we're sort of extending out as well, not officially, but this is we had a volunteer day with children developing a log pile reserve and a nettle reserve for amphibians and invertebrates and mammals. And finally, this is just a shout out for the Palmer's Green Community Cafe, who, as I said, have funded a lot of our things. That's yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, both of you. Right, so we'll do questions after we hear from Suzanne. But feel free to pop anything into the chat if you like, and I'll pick it up in a bit. So Suzanne, would you like to talk about your space, the Up Garden in Newham?
Sure. Thank you so much to Go Parks London and London Friends of Green Spaces Network for inviting me. I am the founder and chair of the Up Garden, which is a former laundry yard in a council estate in Forest Gate, which is in East London. It was abandoned for decades, about 40 years minimum, before a bunch of us local residents reclaimed it in 2022. We transformed it into a community hub in the space of 6 months. And within a year of launch, we were crowned the inaugural winners of the RHS and the BBC's Award for Community Gardening. And we have been featured on the One Show twice. I have no slides, so you'll just have to look at my giant face, I'm afraid. So I would love to tell you about all the hard work that went into creating the Up Garden, what we have there, our micro allotment scheme, our tea project, our forest school, our library, a piano, what else we do, but I wouldn't even touch the surface in 10 minutes. So instead, I'm going to give my top 10 tips for reclaiming a green space. I'm not sure if there are any people on here who don't yet have a community garden, but are thinking about it, or if you all represent green spaces already, but maybe you get inquiries and you might find this information interesting or useful. And you can check out the Up Garden afterwards on our website, theupgarden.org, as well as on our social media, which is at the Up Garden and all the usual places. And there's also an article that I wrote for GIGL, which Laura included on the email publicising this webinar, and she will circulate that later. So the first top 10 tip is your core group. So in my experience, the sort of people who take the lead on reclaiming a space become a community garden and might be attending this webinar also tend to be proactive go-getter types. For your own sanity, I strongly suggest that before you get too far into dreaming up layouts and looking into who owns the land, that you find your core group first. If you find this group after you've already done too much groundwork, it sets the dynamic of the group, and they are less likely to feel a shared ownership and responsibility towards the project, potentially with you ending up doing most of the work. Now, in community groups, not just gardens, there are always people who are more organised than others, who are better at admin, have more availability. You can never get perfectly equal contributions, but you can set things up to be as democratic as possible rather than the illusion of democracy. My second point is key aims. So something I think to agree early on is what you intend from that green space. In the London Borough of Newham, where we are, we have a pretty active WhatsApp network of green spaces, and they come in all types. So exactly who is your space for? Will it be a closed group of residents or the wider public? If it's the latter, will they all actually be able to access it? If you have restricted opening hours, because you can only open when you have volunteers, the chances are that you are not that accessible to large parts of your community. If you are an unmonitored space and are open daily with long hours like the Up Garden, you leave yourself vulnerable, really vulnerable to antisocial behaviour. So how are you going to mitigate that? if you run events, will they be free? Which is great for accessibility, but then how are you going to pay for your overheads? Will there be a charge or a donation? And by the way, if you have minimum donations for entry, that is not a donation. A mandatory donation is not a donation, it is a fee, which is absolutely fine, but just own it. The core group, I think, needs to be broadly on the same page about these key aims, because they're going to dictate so much of how your approach is going to be on other things. Something else to think about is your status. What type of group are you going to be? You could be a registered charity, of which there are various types. And the main pro is that you will be eligible for substantially more grants. But there is admin time involved in obtaining that status and maintaining it thereafter. There are obligations you will have to keep fulfilling. You will need trustees. Think about how that affects your dynamics. If you're not going to have time to apply or project manage lots of funded projects, do you need the eligibility status in the first place? At the other end of the spectrum, there are unincorporated non-profit associations like the Up Garden. That is less onerous, and it gives you more freedom in terms of just getting on with things, to be honest. You don't have to have formal documentation, but it's really worth having a constitution in place and certain other policies just to reduce misunderstandings between you all later on. You'll also need those anyway to get a community bank account and to apply for the tiny sliver of grant applications that you are actually eligible for. Please note that individual members are personally responsible for any debts and contractual obligations. So make sure you get public liability insurance, and ideally also employers' liability insurance for your volunteers. You don't have to agree all this at the outset, and if you become a type of organisation later on, you can also change, but it's worth discussing how you all feel about the different types and their pros and cons, and then you can be more informed and less backtracking, hopefully. The next thing is quite obvious, it's permission. Please get the permission of the landowner. If it's the council, identify someone who can support you and connect you with the right departments. In Newham, we are lucky that the Community Neighbourhoods Department have always been super supportive of us, but other departments needed a really good spiel from us about the negatives, about leaving the space unused and the benefits of reclaiming. And if you can find their own formal documentation, so with because the Up Garden was created with a grant, so I was also getting them to give us money. I quoted their own local plan and COVID recovery strategy back at them. So that's really good because it helps them understand, oh, you're on the same page. It's going to be a symbiotic relationship. I recommend trying to be your most charming self, even if someone is being highly frustrating, because you will have to keep working with them in the future if they give permission. In the event that permission is denied, as annoying as that is, it is what it is. However, you do already have your core group of hopefully equally motivated people, and perhaps another nearby patch of land will present itself to you. The Up Garden is not in the location that we originally intended, but it's worked out so much better in lots of ways. Think also about what form your permission will take. Will it be a lease or a license? There are reasons for and against both, and that cannot be covered in this length of webinar. The next thing to think about is what is most likely to go wrong and how can you mitigate? You probably already need to know your arguments to convince the landowner, but you should think about these things anyway, because it will be your group that has to solve them. I think one of the main issues for green spaces, especially unmonitored spaces like the Up Garden, is antisocial behaviour. Now, in my view, ASB thrives where there are no witnesses or those witnesses feel disempowered. And so for us, our best shield is simply being well used. And having visitors in as much as possible so that naughty people who might take a peep in decide to find somewhere else they can do whatever it is they want to do. Keeping it well used falls back on, I think, it looking welcoming, and being connected to your community, both of which I will cover in a little bit. You should also connect with the local police officers. Ours are really friendly and supportive. They came to do an assessment to let us know weak points of access, some suggestions, and they've added us onto their patrol rounds, which was really lovely of them. Now, obviously, another problem is going to be water. Do you have a mains tap? If not, can you get one? If you can get one, who's going to pay for it? The Up Garden doesn't have a mains tap. I had an extremely long battle and resoundingly lost on that. So are you just going to rely on water bots? Will they be enough? Can you do what we did, which was tap into down pipes from the neighbouring building, the housing block, with permission, of course. Think about choosing plants that require less water and other ways of retaining moisture. For example, planters, which is a box with a bottom on the bottom, require 10 times more watering than raised beds, which is basically just sides plopped on top of earth. I think the next thing to think about is how much money you will need to transform. One, how much money you will need to transform your green space, and two, maintain it thereafter. I think too often people get excited and fixate on the vision without thinking how it will survive in the long term. Will just your group cover the costs? In which case, what happens if there are changes of circumstance between your core group? How do you keep fresh money coming in? Will you need donations? In which case, how are you going to get those? Like, your community only has so much goodwill if you keep coming back to them every month with yet another fundraiser event. Will it be corporate sponsorship? If so, do you need to think about what they expect from you, and whether your values align as well? Will it be grants? In which case, are you eligible? Who's going to find the time to apply? Who's going to give all the project management time afterwards? Reports, meetings. It's so onerous project managing a funded project. The Up Gardens creation was funded by a GLA grant, plus matched funds from the local authority and the Housing Association. And I submitted a business plan of how we could survive for at least 5 years on the 10% of maintenance money that we were allowed to carve out of it, which I think is a really good exercise worth doing anyway, even if you're not going for grants. You can obviously reduce your cost by getting donated or borrowing items, which is my next tip, and upcycling, which is just great for the environment. And it also allows for some upskilling. If you don't already have them, make good connections with your local businesses. You'd be surprised what they're willing to donate or lend, and what services exist in the area when you start searching around and speaking to other people in your community. So our picnic benches and the railway sleepers that form our stumpery, they come from my two favourite pubs. My local fishmonger lent us his pallet trolley. Our local tea business is our man and van for items that we need collecting. We're located very close to a metalworkers, a steel worker, a scaffolding company, a roofing company, all of whom have been just absolutely instrumental and are really, really happy to help out. They don't just want to be faceless companies that just take up business space. They want to be part of your community. The next one is your most precious commodity, which is your volunteers. Unless it's a very small space, you will almost certainly need more volunteers than your core group to transform it and then maintain it, hopefully forevermore. Unless you'll be solely relying on corporate volunteers, which also involves a fair bit of schmoozing and planning, you need to be well connected to the various communities around you. And you should really do a community consultation right at the outset to find out their views on whether they even want a community garden, and if so, what they want in it. if you involve them in the process and give them ownership, I think that's really key to your local community supporting you long term. And you may, well, you want as many as possible, because ideally you want the perfect Venn overlap between people who have the right skills, people who have the right mindset, and people who have the right availability. And the majority of your volunteers are only going to have one or two of those at a time. So it's a case of being flexible with who you have to make things work. The more people you have, the easier that is. My next tip is led on to from that, which is how are you going to keep getting new volunteers as the circumstances of existing ones change and they have to move on. That's just how life is. And how you're going to keep getting visitors in to ward off ASB and use your community garden, which is presumably for the community. So that's probably going to be a range of different events, which I think are just also great for bringing your community together. You're unlikely to get everyone together at once, so you may need different events for different groups of people, but then think about the cost and labour of putting on all those events. And I think there's a real difficult balance between focusing on the ones that are going to give you the most reward, which makes sense because we're all volunteers, but also then what happens to the marginalized groups. And it's really difficult because it's really hard asking people to give up their time and then like 2 people turn up. So you just have to judge that for yourself as to where you can expend your resources and who you want to target. So think also about how you're going to let people know about the events. Unfortunately, I do think social media is necessary nowadays, but you don't need to have every account. I would say that Instagram has the best reach over our main demographics, but Facebook is more popular with older residents who are more likely to have more availability. Twitter, which I cannot call X, is good for sponsors and business donors. They really love being shouted out on there. I don't know if that will keep continuing, but currently it's still sort of worthwhile. But I would say don't set up an account if you're not going to maintain it, as I think that actually can be worse than just not having a presence. As for websites, do you need one? People like naturally will gravitate towards, we need a website, but can you get away with something like Linktree? So the Up Garden has both, and you can check them out to see how they're used differently. The main advantage with Linktree is that it's just a page of links, and it's what we link to on our Instagram so that people can get to stuff we've posted about very quickly instead of navigating our entire website. But of course, the website allows us to do much, much more. I think it's really important to connect with your wider community to keep them updated with what's going on and remind them why they should visit or get involved. The longer you stay out of touch with them, the bigger the impact it kind of needs to be to get them all sort of coming back again. Just to round up, I've said community a lot, and that's because from my view, the keyword in community gardens is community. It's not gardens. I think nature always finds a way. It survives without us. I see that in the dandelions, in the cracks of pavements, and it might not be what we as humans find aesthetically pleasing, but it works perfectly fine for the local wildlife, believe me. And certainly in our case, gardening is very much a trial and error approach. We have no horticultural experts, just some keen and wonderful hobby gardeners who have some gardening books and Google. There's a lot of Googling that goes on, and if something doesn't work out, just have another go or just try it again, try something else. So I think that when it comes to creating a community garden, what you really need is the community. They are the ones who have the power to transform it into what that community needs, whether it's big or small. And as for the Up Garden, whilst I'm really, really, really proud of the transformation and the sustainability and the biodiversity that we've achieved. The thing I'm most proud of is how it's brought our community together, especially in meaningful ways. There are, even though we have lots of different types of volunteers, there's about half a dozen regulars who actually maintain it. And none of them knew each other prior to the Up Garden, even though they lived on adjacent streets for decades. I'm talking 30 years. And like for the last year and a half, they've met every single week for community gardening and half-time biscuits. And I just think that's just so wonderful to know that this physical space has created this very meaningful relationships now that will survive. If the Up Garden somehow was obliterated tomorrow, which would be devastating, those friendships would still survive, and perhaps the Up Garden would be created in another way. So yeah, our approach is that it's less about knowing about the gardening and it's more about the community. And I think that's why we won our award. And that was really wonderful validation. That's it for me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, really interesting to hear. Just to follow on from what Suzanne said about how both the Up Garden and the growing projects at Broomfield Park brought in, different parts of the community to contribute and to enjoy it and to interact with each other. And I think that's really, really key and so lovely as well. So we've got some questions in the chat. So I'll go to those first, and then yeah, if you want to put your hand up or put something else in the chat, then we can come to those. So someone asked, so they said amazing range of work and fantastic work with so many projects. They wanted to know if you have any paid employees to manage everything and how do you keep it all going. So I think probably it sounds like neither of your groups have paid employees, but do you want to take turns answering that? So Suze, do you want to go first, maybe?
Sorry, I unmuted myself. No, we have no employees. What was the second follow-up question of that?
How do you manage to keep it all going? I think you kind of touched on that towards the end of what you were just saying.
It was having those really core people who are either there just as before we even applied for anything, or also very swiftly joined us following our very first community consultation. And they just are so passionate and on the same page. We might not be on the same page in terms of our approaches and opinions, but in terms of like how special and important this space is, we're definitely all on the same page. And because they're there every single day, they have sort of more ownership of it than I do, even though I'm technically I founded it. Yeah, they're just super invested and so willing to help out. But also, like I said, always being connected to the community, always connecting with our community, having the events, making sure that we're always welcoming them in and reminding them that we exist and that we are volunteers and we need help.
Thanks. Kim and Dave, do you want to touch on that one?
I think Susan's made some very interesting points about the importance of the right connections at the beginning of any project. When I wasn't part of the Friends of Broomfield Park when I came up with the idea of the orchard, and I was working with a group called Improving Our Place, which we were trying to do various things locally. And one of that group was in the Friends of Broomfield Park. He said, come along to a meeting and present the ideas. And it was a meeting where councillors were there as well. And the Friends were very receptive to the idea. They found it slightly odd that someone who wasn't a member of the Friends group was sort of promoting the idea of the orchard. I didn't find that odd at all. But we got good support from the Friends of Broomfield Park, good support from councillors. It so happened at that time that Enfield had a small budget for community orchards, which helped pump prime our project. And also, when I was negotiating with Enfield, I asked for a single point of contact in the council to deal with anything to do with the local authority. And he was the allotment officer at Enfield, and he was involved in the project, and he is still involved in it 15 years later, as following his retirement. So there's that continuity, which is so important. And I think the worrying thing for us is planning for the future. You know, when people aren't able to do heavy work, but they come along and just want to have a chat, which is fine, that's important. But we have managed to get some young people, strong young people involved, which has been very, very encouraging.
I think we should say we don't have any, well, we occasionally employ someone as a consultant for a particular project, but we have an extraordinary committee and an executive of the committee who put in almost full-time work on it sometimes. There's Richard McKeever sitting on the screen at the moment, who's one of those who's doing it. So there's been a huge commitment from that, which is very lucky to have people who want to get engaged with it and put the time in.
And promoting the activities through the website we've got and Facebook, and doing mail shots about our events. The events in the orchard are all free, but not all events in the park are free. But and that takes a lot of effort to get those going. Like an apple day, you know, getting enough people to prepare the apples to juice, who bake cakes, who want to actually chop up the apples and things like that. But so far, it's worked very well. So it's a lot of work, but it pays dividends.
I'm just going to skip one question because we had a question about engaging young people, which I think it really follows on nicely from what you were just talking about. They said, how do you encourage younger volunteers? It was obviously interesting to hear in Broomfield Park about, you know, engaging specific schools and things like that. But I think sort of more broadly, how do you encourage younger volunteers is, yeah, that's a really interesting question. Broomfield Park, do you want to go first?
Well, it's initially it was as a result of people hearing about the orchard who said, "Oh, I might have some people who could get involved." And Enfield MenCap, for example, my neighbour happened to be chair of Enfield MenCap, and I was talking to him about the orchard. He said, "Oh, I think this is something we'd really like to get a group coming along," which is how that happened. And similarly, I was approached by the local mental health trust about their wellbeing group, and they wanted to come and do gardening in the park. And we do a range of activities, including gardening. We do art as well, and that is so. It's amazing what a difference it makes to young people who have difficult challenges, and to older ones as well.
I think it's always been a focus of the committee to try and get more young people and more diversity in the people who are coming, and looking at other populations who don't use the park so often. And it's some of those, the excluded school children and Westley school links, some of those have come through council recommendations. Once you start doing that, others come and ask, and at times we have trouble coping with the workload of it. But we also try and all the different groups in the parks try and put on events that will attract young people. And the Greenery Community Cafe in particular, with their funding and schemes, are very focused on rather than buying benches and things like that, they want the money to be spent on projects that will engage young people. And at the moment, they're working with Make Space for Girls on another very interesting project.
You're
So-
muted. Oh,
I just realized I muted myself. Yes, we did a webinar with Mixed Space for Girls a couple of years ago, and that was really interesting stuff to think about. And I liked what you put in your presentation as well about, I think maybe it was the Build Hackney project where you co-designed with the young people and then built something that they wanted to actually use. Suze, would you like to touch on the one about engaging young people?
Yeah, I think getting them involved really young. So we run free family events in term holidays. We have an after-school forest school there, which is funded by someone else and run by someone else, but we're buddies. We have our weekly community gardening drop-in, which is in the after school slots. It is mostly attended by older people, but the whole point is that we keep it in that slot in case families want to come in. And sometimes people do, they'll drop in. What else? I think also at the various events that we run, don't presume that people know how much help you actually need. Obviously, we don't want to look like a chaotic mess. It's, we are, the proverbial, swan gliding, and it's just all going crazy underneath. So our events look really well managed and stuff like that. But it's important for our volunteers to be there at those events, and not in a depressing way, just in a very natural way, explaining, this is all run by volunteers. We barely get any funding. We would really love some help. Here's, if you've got, if you can give regular time, but only 5 minutes, you could join our locking group. If you could have like a whole afternoon, but you don't know when, you might be able to help with like an ad hoc afternoon of painting, that kind of thing. But yeah, letting them know. I think something that has been suggested to us, which we haven't been able to take up on, is finding about local, I guess it would be horticultural or gardening colleges, finding out if people need placements.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. Thank you. And then John asked about there were freight containers. I think that was perhaps on the Broomfield park site. He wanted to know who paid for these and did it require local permission?
They're not freight containers. They're secure sheds, and the Friends paid for those. Part of the funding came through our events group, and part of it came from the community cafe funding. They're not cheap, and you have to put them in and make a base for them. It's all a lot of work, but we're lucky that we have lots of volunteers who get involved with that kind of thing. But we've had other police secure sheds. We haven't spoken much about vandalism and the problems we have, but over the years, there's been a huge problem of our sheds and premises being broken into, equipment stolen. People will turn up with power-driven cutters to cut through steel sheds. The sheds we've shown you last, they've actually been very effective over about 4 years now.
That's good. And John also asked about using Action Funder to get grants. I guess more broadly, would be useful to know where people find opportunities to apply for funding, I guess is also the sort of the related question there. Suze, would you like to touch on that one first?
Sorry, can you just been a bit scratchy? What was the question again?
He asked about whether anyone has used Action Funder to identify fundraising opportunities, and I guess more broadly, where do you go to look for opportunities to apply for funds?
So we haven't, but we're really new. Like we're only just over 2 years old, and we are very small in terms of volunteers. So we have not used. I've heard of it. We haven't used it yet. The main thing for us at the moment, so I mentioned that I'm on a WhatsApp network of Newham community gardens, and there's a really amazing collegiate atmosphere on there. People do share links of grants, even though technically you would be competing against each other. They're shared anyway. Also, I mentioned that our community neighbourhoods department of our local authority are really supportive of us. So they already have a distribution list that I think comes out weekly, setting out these are all the local grants that, because you're in Newham, you might be eligible for. So yeah, it's basically being connected on the right networks.
Looks like Dave wants to jump in there for a second.
Yeah, I just think the importance of being connected. I mean, obviously, this meeting's really helpful. We can hear, great practice from elsewhere. And I'm sure lots of people present could share their own experiences too, which we can only do so much at one meeting. But if you're part of a network, and in terms of the friends groups movement, it's really important to have a friends groups network in every borough. And so far, there's about 22 boroughs that have friends groups, forums or networks. So there's opportunities to spread the number of networks, and obviously community gardens as well have their own networks, and sometimes they're part of friends groups networks and so on. So yeah, that's I think really important message coming out today, is we need to build strong networks and all support each other.
Thank you. I'll go over to Broomfield Park, and then I see that Victoria's got her hand up as well. So yes, Kim and David, do you have any tips for identifying funding?
We get funding from a lot of sources. We're the projects we described are a small part of the overall Friends group in the park. We get quite a lot from the events that we run in different parts. We've had lottery grants focused at particular things. We've just had quite a big grant from the Environment Agency. We're working with them on clean water running through the park. We do quite well with donations. And then, as I've said repeatedly before, the community cafe, they make quite a lot of profit, and they funnel that through into specific projects. So there are a lot of, particularly with anything to do with clean water and biodiversity, there's quite a lot of grants out there. And part of the problem is if you get a grant, you've got to do something with it. So you need people who are going to actually take projects forward and run them. So we actually find that more difficult than getting the money at the moment, I think.
Can I just
Thank you.
could I just
go ahead.
add to something that Kim said? We're very lucky that we are able to use the former Bowls Club building in Broomfield Park. It's the Bowls Club packed up, and the one of the bowling greens now is used for our summer events program, and these are the ones that generate a lot of money. Theatre, film, music, and that produces quite a big income to the Friends, who then distribute it to the profits to projects within the park. So we have a system whereby each group that's doing different things in the park can bid for money. And fortunately, the Orchard has been quite good at getting some money from things like our art and crafts sale, through our Apple Day, through the sale of honey, for example, and that goes into the pot that the Friends can allocate to different projects. The one thing that worries us about the clubhouse that we use is that Enfield are desperate to make as much, or they're selling off land basically and assets. And if they were to sell the Bowls Club, we wouldn't be able to hold any events in the park. We store all our equipment in there. We've got a dry space we can use. We got a lot of our gardening equipment in there as well, and we're just keeping our fingers crossed that the people involved in property will won't raid us and evict us from the clubhouse.
Having said that, we have had a lot of support from Enfield Council, a lot of funding going into particular projects. So yeah, the council have been very important as well.
The local councillors.
Yeah.
We've got a boating pond in the park, which is just within about 100 meters of the clubhouse, and that's the borehole there's had to be sorted out. The water supply to it, the ponds had to be waterproofed, and that was funded by Enfield through their Section 106 monies. It's been a nightmare. It's not complete as a project, but local councils are very supportive of getting work like that completed.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Okay, Victoria, would you like to? And then I think we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Laura. Sorry, I'll try and make this very quick. I just want to say thank you to everyone as well. I'm from Giggle, Green Space Information for Greater London, local environmental record centre. We actually featured, as Sue mentioned, a brilliant article about the Up Garden that she wrote. Not too long ago. It was wonderful. I'd recommend checking it out. But we generally try and support like groups sort of doing biodiversity initiatives, and I've shared it with Laura in the last London Friends Green Spaces Network newsletter about a new map we've launched specifically to help people link up like any habitat actions that they're doing. And like share expertise and maybe hopefully gather some more volunteers as well. So there's obviously other resources specifically for friends of groups, and there's the Capital Growth Network as well, which is brilliant for like run by Sustain, which is great for community gardens. But if you've got any specific biodiversity projects, it would be great to get them on the map, which I can share more details with again. I couldn't put them in the chat. I'm not too sure why. But like, if you're flagged to us as well, then we can also help with like managing any species data you collect, and especially if you've got any priority species on site like the white letter hairstreak and whatnot, having that in our database. Whoa, so sorry, it was a very loud bump, but having that in our database can be really valuable for helping to fight planning applications in some instances as well. So I'll share my email address as well, but if anyone has any questions or anything, please do reach out. And thank you, Laura, again for organising.
Yeah, no problem. I can put a link, the one that was featured in the newsletter, I can send that out with the after webinar materials. Great. So I just want to say thank you so much to the speakers. That was really, really interesting. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think everyone else has too. There's been really positive comments in the chat. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences today, and thank you to everyone for attending and for your questions and input and everything. So I think we'll close up here, and enjoy your day. Thank you so much, everyone.